So we are all on the same page with the fact that the Chiefs 2025 season is over, but maybe we're not all on the same page for whether or not the 2025 season is kind of worth watching anymore. I think it is. I think that it is worth watching in the same way that we watched the preseason. I said this a couple days ago, that it's about projecting into the future what you think that these players can be at this point. But I do think that it is worth also getting into the sort of off-season vernacular that we will be throwing around, that we will be bantering about in the months to come. And one of those things is about the Chiefs' salary cap situation heading into 2026 and, quite frankly, beyond. When you have the premier player in the NFL, this gets to be a headache for any franchise, the Chiefs notwithstanding. So there has been a graphic that has been sort of floating around Twitter in nefarious fashion, I might dare to say, and it is this: the Chiefs are using 80% of cap space on 8 players, and then it lists these players out. Patrick Mahomes, $78 million. Chris Jones, $45 million. Jawaan Taylor, $27 million. Trey Smith, $24 million. Nick Bolton, $19 million. Jalen Moore, $19 million. Creed Humphrey, $18 million. And George Karlaftis, $15 million. This is also leading up to the Chiefs' salary cap situation for next season being this negative $35.7 million as of right now. And when we look at these players, well, it's not pretty, right? So Patrick Mahomes, obviously, this has to be paid. That is first and foremost. Chris Jones sat out the Lions game week 1 of the season a couple years ago and has not really been Chris Jones since he got the money necessary to come back to the Kansas City Chiefs. Fine and dandy 31-year-old defensive tackles sometimes just do that. Jawaan Taylor, this is what happens when you get in a pinch and you have to have a player at a position. The Chiefs had to have a tackle in that offseason. And look, you can say what you want about Brett Veach's ability to draft. Tackles, if anyone thinks they can play, go early and they go often. So it's difficult to draft offensive tackles when you are picking at 30th, 31st, 32nd every year. That makes that very, very difficult. And that is why, by the way, when you look at this list, there are 2 here. But listen, and so obviously Jawaan Taylor has underperformed, right? Jalen Moore, I think, has to this point been kind of who it is you expected him to be when you're looking at what it means to play offensive tackle in the NFL. Not really great, not really bad, but when he had to be on the field, he was serviceable. And $19 million is kind of the going rate for a serviceable offensive tackle in today's NFL. But when you're looking at this, you're seeing, especially with Jawaan Taylor, a player that the Chiefs had to have when they had to have him, so they had to overpay. And guess what? There were some Super Bowls in the wake of that decision. Now, where this gets really interesting is here. Offensive tackle, center, $18 million, offensive guard, $24 million. Maybe I should use this, there we go. Does that work? Am I going to Bob Ross it here? All right. Look at that. Oh, that turned brown. What are we doing here? Anyway, so you're looking at, of the top 8 paid players on the Kansas City Chiefs, 4 of them play offensive line, 1 of them is a backup, and we all really wish this one was a backup as well. When you're looking at the top 8 paid players on the Kansas City Chiefs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are offensive players. Then you have George Karlaftis, Nick Bolton, and obviously Chris Jones as the defensive players on this list. Now, that's not a terrible split. 5-3. Not a terrible split when the NFL is so decidedly an offensive league. Here's the real kicker when you're looking at these players. This is kind of the only one that is particularly productive and playing a premier position in the NFL. Like George Karlaftis has not been a sack monster. Now, $15 million isn't sack monster money either. That is the going rate for a decent defensive end in the NFL. But 4 offensive linemen in the top 8 paid players on the Chiefs, and the offensive line is still struggling. Ironically, the strongest part of the offensive line, one of the strongest parts of the offensive line this season, is not on this list. Kingsley Suamataia did a perfectly serviceable job at the left guard position. Not a highly paid player. But, and don't freak out, I'm not saying that the Kansas City Chiefs should do all of this. I'm not saying that the Kansas City Chiefs will do any of this, but they have to do some of it. That said, we will go over what the Chiefs' salary cap would be if they did all of this, just for fun. If they traded, and this is from Spot Track, because it seems that I am getting a little bit of a different set of numbers based on where it is that I go and try to look at this. So I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if some of the websites have differences on them, but we're just going to go through it. If the Chiefs traded Chris Jones, they would free up $15.6 million of cap space. Now, why would they trade Chris Jones? He's the only defensive player they have that is worth anything. Well, did you look at the stats this year? Did you look at the stats last year? Why would anyone trade for him if that's all he's doing? Well, the stats themselves are a bit misleading, but they're not as misleading as they have been in the past. Chris Jones could have been getting 30 sacks a year had offenses just left him alone and let him be Chris Jones. But they don't, so they double team him. And when they double team him in previous seasons, sometimes he could still get to the quarterback. Now, anyone who is a name guy, anyone who is a highlights guy, I should say it that way, because Chris Jones does have a name. If it's Jerry Jones is looking at stat sheets and highlights. He's not going to give you anything for Chris Jones. If you find yourself a football guy, Mike Vrabel might give you a first-round pick for Chris Jones. That is the kind of production Chris Jones is still not getting, but allowing. So he does get the double teams. He does clean stuff up. He does get in the quarterback's passing lanes, things like that. So someone, and I went to a source, not a real source, an AI source, but we'll talk about that in a moment, just to see what it would be that the Chiefs might be able to get for someone like Chris Jones. But if they did trade him, they could free up $15.6 million. I hate that color. We're going back to red. What about Trey Smith? If they traded Trey Smith, they would free up $11.5 million. Again, this is according to Spot Track, because I thought they were still at the point in Trey Smith's contract where they might lose money for trading him, but that is not what Spot Track said. Why trade Trey Smith? Well, you've seen with Kingsley Suamataia that you can plug someone in at offensive guard, and if they do a well enough job, a decent enough performance, then you're going to get a pretty good offensive line on that side of the ball. When it was Josh Simmons and Kingsley Suamataia on the left side of the line, even though they were both young players, things were going pretty well. Trey Smith has been injured for a good portion of this season, and Mike Caliendo has proven himself not to be a backup offensive guard in the NFL. Still, you have C.J. Hansen. Still, You have Hunter Nourzad. So you are allowed the ability to figure that out while, hey, maybe you go and you sign somebody on the free agent market in the $5 million range. You're still up, what would that be? $6.5 million in salary cap. You have an answer at the right guard position, and you're saving more money going forward because Trey Smith, again, it will save you $11.5 million this season, but he has didn't go up quite far enough, $24 million cap number. That is a massive number for an offensive guard. That's not an offensive tackle. Okay, what if you trade Nick Bolton? Now, I think that if you trade Nick Bolton, maybe you have a better shot at re-signing Leo Chenal. I think that Leo Chenal can do everything that Nick Bolton does. I don't know that he is as instinctual a player. Nick Bolton has the ethereal ability to find himself in the right place at the right time. He can be trailing a wide receiver or tight end in a route. All of a sudden, it's a tip drill. Well, guess who comes up with the ball? Baby, it's Nick Bolton. Somehow, he was trailing the entire route, but comes up with the interception. That just happens to be Nick Bolton to a T. Still, you are paying a guy who is playing a non-premier position $19 million per season. That is tough to justify, A, when you're in cap trouble, but also, B, when you're talking about a team that underperformed all last season. Now, Jawaan Taylor. I said traded here. It might be that he ends up getting cut. I don't think Brett Veach is going to give anything away for free. Well, why would anyone trade for Jawaan Taylor? He is a laundry machine with how many flags get thrown on him. Do not fool yourself. Because, and this is, look, I'm saying this out loud because I do it to myself too, just cut him. Just cut him. Between the snap and the whistle, Jawaan Taylor is a more than serviceable offensive tackle. A lot of false starts, a lot of neutral, whatever it is, whatever the penalty is you want to name, fine. But when he's facing someone's left defensive end, he is pretty good protecting the passer. There's plenty of teams that want that. There's teams that will overpay for that because they have a young quarterback and they are in the stage of development where they're just trying to keep him upright and they have salary cap money. They might as well spend. So that would free up 20. Jalen Moore. I thought, again, this is something that you could not do at this point in his contract, but it says if we trade Spotrac says if we trade Jalen Moore, you save $15 million. Hard to justify that unless you're keeping Jawaan Taylor, right? So if it is that Ezapole plays pretty well these next 3 games, and I fully suspect that he will be on the field every snap of all 3 games, health permitting, that what you're looking at is a guy who can earn an offensive tackle spot. Probably you want that to be the swing tackle spot. Josh Simmons has already proven that maybe not the most dependable as far as what it means to actually step onto the field, right? Had whatever that situation was, we don't know what it was, a lot of speculation what it was, he took time away from football. Very unusual. And you have to bank on that happening again if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, because if you don't, and it does, well, now you're toast. So I fully suspect that if there's no deals available in free agency, I fully suspect that if no offensive tackle falls to them in the draft, one of these two will be back. Ezapole will be your swing tackle, and Josh Simmons will be your left tackle, meaning that one of these two guys would play right tackle for you. It also says if you trade Christian Fulton, you save $10 million. I think that is hard to pull off when he doesn't play the entire season. So hopefully, over the next 3 games, he gets a little bit of playing time in order to just show what it is that he can do. I said trade Noah Gray. He will have trade value. It will not be much. You can pick up something for Noah Gray. That will save you $4 million. Mike Danna. Getting rid of Mike Danna saves you $9 million. Prior to this season, I thought this was a glue guy. Turns out there's not much going on there, right? So just is what it is. You should make that move. It will save you money. Drue Tranquill. I fully suspect that the Chiefs will try to figure out what it is that Jeffrey Bassa offers them over the next 3 weeks, and it might mean that they can move on from Drue Tranquill and save $6 million. Now, remember, this is necessary because some of this is going to be necessary because they are entering the next cycle $35.7 million in debt. So, what about Felix Enudike Uzama? I think he has trade value, not a draft pick. I think he has trade value, not a good player. I think he has trade value. What you'll see sometimes from general managers is, hey, FAU busted for me. Do you have any busts that you want to get rid of? Because if you trade them, you get something back for them and your fan base isn't quite as mad at you. Yeah, hey, my former 3rd round pick is a giant bust. Let's just swap them. So, you'd be picking up probably someone else's contract here, but probably that player is not a 1st round player, so they wouldn't be costing $2.361 million and then an extra $520 just to have it. So, you would probably be downgrading in contracts and just say, that's that 3rd round pick that you're trading the Bears for FAU. Their 3rd round pick that failed out was also a defensive end. Well, then you wash out, right? He's probably going to make the roster, and you have a guy because you need warm bodies at this point. And then Wanya Morris. I'm conflicted on this one. I do think that he would have trade value when you're looking at draft day trades. This is the kind of guy that gets moved on day 3 for basically peanuts or peanuts plus my draft pick. So you would package Wanya Morris into 7th to get into the 6th, right? Something like that. I do think Wanya Morris can be an offensive guard in the NFL. I think that with a couple of years, Wanya Morris can probably be a serviceable tackle in the NFL. I think it might just be that he is out of his opportunities with the Kansas City Chiefs. Sometimes that's what happens. That might be what it is here. He needs a fresh start. The Chiefs need a fresh start. Probably. It might be that you end up see the Chiefs cut him instead of trading him, but they're going to have to acquire some more talent somewhere along the way in order to make any of this really, any of these offensive linemen being cut or traded really plausible. So let's look at a couple other things here because I thought that this was super interesting. So if you just went ahead and straight up murked the salary cap and got rid of all of those guys, you would go from $35 million in debt to having $70 million to spend. Now, look how fast the Patriots put all of that money to work and got better. For some reason, Brett Veach seems absolutely cursed in free agency. But look how fast the Broncos took a bunch of cap space and got put back together. It's possible to do this. I don't think they're going to find themselves in this situation. I want to be very clear about that. But when you're talking about this, there are things that we did not even discuss. So when we go back up to these 8 players, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is actually going to earn $78 million against the cap. They're going to convert some of that. They're going to do some tricks of the trade with whatever. I think that Creed Humphrey You'll notice I didn't put Creed Humphrey on the trader cut list. I think he's going to be a Kansas City Chief for the long haul. They were talking about positional versatility with him this previous season or this previous preseason. So I don't think Creed Humphrey is going anywhere. I don't really think George Karlaftis is going anywhere just because it's so hard to find defensive ends that you can trust. So you can probably move a little bit of their money around somehow as well. So there are other things that you could do and end up with much more than that type of money there. But I don't think they will do all of those things. Now, I mentioned, what if the Chiefs trade Chris Jones? I'm so bad at trade value stuff if you're not just talking about the lower end guy. Like, I can tell you, yeah, Wanya Morris might get you a 7th. Wanya Morris plus a 7th might get you into the 6th. But when you're talking about players like Chris, I'm just so bad at predicting that stuff. So I asked ChatGPT. And ChatGPT says there are 3 different scenarios if the Chiefs trade Chris Jones. What might they get in return? If the Chiefs eat a meaningful chunk / restructure to make the cap workable, which would give you the best return and I think is a possibility, it would give them a late 2nd round pick plus a mid-round add-on, 4th or 5th, or a 2nd plus a conditional 3rd or 4th tied to snaps / Pro Bowl. Imagine getting a 2nd and a 4th for Chris Jones just for eating some cap, and Chris Jones makes the Pro Bowl. That wouldn't be so bad. Unfortunately, if that is the case, the conditional is very important because it means the only thing that would help you this year is the 2nd. You'd be trading him for a 2nd this year and a conditional next year. So that becomes a very big factor as well. A 2nd round pick this year, you're not going to find Chris Jones, right? You can find a starting running back for sure in the 2nd. You can find a starting wide receiver. That's where Rashee Rice came from. You can find a starting offensive guard, a starting offensive center. That's where Creed Humphrey came from. You can find all sorts of things by accident, right? You can find a Chris Jones after the 1st round, but it's just not, you can't bank on it. So get that plus a 4th next year. That's pretty big. If the acquiring team takes most of the contract as is, more realistic cap-wise for Kansas City to not add cash, it would be a 3rd round pick and a 4th plus conditional that can scale to a 3rd. So again, you're in the same ballpark. If it's a pure deadline rental with no extension plans, a 4th round pick value, because the team would be, so this is if in the season next year things still aren't going well for the Chiefs, they decide to trade Chris Jones. So this would be one of the ultimate moves to suggest that the Chiefs are going full-blown rebuild. And you can do a rebuild quick. You can do a rebuild quick because you have some of the foundational pieces on the offensive line and you have the quarterback. If you have that, you can flip it really freaking fast. And I think that might be what the Kansas City Chiefs end up doing. Now, there's one element that was not on this list at all, and that's Trent McDuffie, because Trent McDuffie is not under contract next year. However, the Chiefs could tag and trade McDuffie. That has been the point of a whole lot of speculation so far. This, I keep trying to say off-season, despite the fact that we're not even in the postseason. But this, since the Mahomes injury, there's been a lot of speculation about a tag and trade for McDuffie. I think all of us have kind of had some inkling of that going up to this point because there was no movement on the McDuffie deal, but it didn't feel safe to talk about while the Chiefs were still eligible. However, I asked, what is the likely scenario if the Chiefs tag and trade McDuffie? Well, the floor would be a 1st round pick, obviously. That's the floor. But I think that is definitely the floor. I think you're getting more than a first-round pick out of Trent McDuffie. What is realistic, ChatGPT says, what I would bet on, I being ChatGPT itself, a first plus a third, or a first plus a second with something which is conditional, swaps conditional. That would be both of those situations would be a little bit disappointing. The ceiling, which Brett Veach has been pretty good about getting the ceilings or close to the ceilings on trades. Think about what the Chiefs got for Tyreek Hill, a guy who, for whatever it's worth, did have personality problems. A guy who, at that time, had a couple really good seasons, but you don't know that he's going to be one of these guys that has 10 of those years. You don't know that he's going to be one of those guys who can go pop off for 1,800 yards. A big haul for Tyreek Hill. So the ceiling, 2 firsts or a first plus a second plus a third type package. That would be an incredible haul for Trent McDuffie. Trent McDuffie, again, an absolute pro, someone that you don't want to have to part ways with. But if Trent McDuffie goes and you end up getting 2 starters out of it, now you got to bank on Brett Veach getting starters, but he did get Trent McDuffie as well. So if you are banking on getting starters, then being better at 2 positions, is that more valuable than being pretty elite at 1 position? Well, the issue with that math is, Trent McDuffie isn't playing the position where he is elite. He's not playing the slot. He's having to play out wide. Part of the problem that we have with the Kansas City Chiefs to this point in this season, in my opinion, is the star power. They got plenty of guys who can play a role. 1 through 53, I think that this is the best team Patrick Mahomes has ever had, and it ended up going 6 and 8 with him at the helm. The problem is the talent at the top isn't really there. Well, when you're drafting 31st, 32nd every year, it's difficult to get that talent. So if you can get 2 firsts for McDuffie, and you end up hitting on them both, that really goes a long way. But Trent McDuffie is elite. So that is your star power. Anyway, guys, just some talking points that I found interesting. If you like or appreciate this sort of thing, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this with other Chiefs fans. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. And as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.